that's why we talk about occasionally, we talk about the Southern Baptist Convention. And I don't know, I think that sometimes when you have it too easy, when you have it too good, when you have all these different resources and that at your fingertips, sometimes you can just kind of lay back and just kind of get fat on the lamb, and not do what you were called to do. And that's what,
Yeah.
I think that's where we find a lot of the ministry today.
Well, and I think that's true because I think people either, again, I don't know what people all thought, but somebody must have thought that, by moving the brotherhood, the mission in the direction of brotherhood into a larger context would somehow grow it. And we're looking around going, I'm not seeing any mission education for men and boys on the level that we were doing it at NAM. I know it's out there in some levels, and I know some people are trying to do a good job, but where are the men and where is that work being done for and with and
Yeah.
to, and
Yeah.
it's just not there.
Well, two things that I was a common reaction when I was working with nationals from other faiths, and when you'd be in country and you'd be working with when you're doing mission work overseas, you know how it is. You don't always just work with Southern Baptists; you work with others too.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
and they when you would describe something like the cooperative program, they were in shock. They were like, "You mean churches give to support sending your missionaries and they don't have to raise their support?" You
Right,
know? And the
right.
other thing was mission education.
Yes.
It was like, you mean you have materials that can educate, from a church-wide perspective, every person in the church? And they were just in
They
shock.
were in shock, and finding that a lot of those missionaries had roots with RAs and GAs and that kind of thing. That they grew up with that, and then to have these programs and ministries like disaster relief and world changers where thousands and thousands of people were engaged in that church
Yeah,
building, and
yeah,
and it was like volunteerism was just ripe for some
yeah.
strategic, more and more involved.
Well, missions is not necessarily glamorous.
No, no.
And I think that hurts its cause. Getting up and being a great expository preacher, you know, on any given Sunday, depending on how large your flock is, that could be exciting, I guess.
Yes.
But getting out, like we just talked about earlier, doing the heavy lifting of mission work is, it's just not
Yep.
glamorous to a lot of
No,
people. You have to really be called to do it, you know.
and I can recall in a couple of occasions where, again, everybody enjoyed, like you said, the evangelistic part of this, where they would have hundreds of people come forward.
Yeah,
But then I would listen to the missionaries afterwards, and they weren't saddened by it, but they were overwhelmed with the amount of
oh,
work now that to get these people
yeah,
discipled. They didn't have the resources, they didn't
yeah,
have the personnel, and a lot of these people came forward due to the excitement of what the evangelism event was, but then they would drop off because nobody was there to follow up. I mean,
yeah,
I heard my pastor say one time, and again, he wasn't knocking Billy Graham, but he said if everybody that came forward in the Billy Graham crusade was connected to a church, we
yeah,
wouldn't be in the shape we're in today
yeah.
with our churches.
Well, and they tried to do that. I mean,
Yeah,
the
there was
postgraduate,
every effort, sure.
yeah, they
Yeah,
would do everything they could, but it like you said, it was overwhelming. And for missionaries in other places that didn't even have that, that lead team kind of
yes,
thing,
yes, very true.
the evangelist would get on the plane and head back home.
Yeah,
And like you said, they would be left with trying to do that follow up,
yeah.
which they didn't just hadn't have the infrastructure to do it.
And again, you and I are not saying that this was terrible in its in and of itself, because again, I think people did what the best they could. But Tim, I just don't think it ever got addressed on the level because we were always more evangelistic in our thinking, more so than we were in our discipleship. I think we should have had both going together equally as strong, and then the ministries on top of that. My concern is with ministry being diminished because we don't do some things like we used to. We didn't have the hospitals and things, and I
Yeah,
understand there's a lot of overhead for all those things, but
yeah,
ministry is very powerful, and it can sometimes preach the gospel as good as anybody standing up on a street corner.
yeah,
I'll probably get
absolutely,
letters for that too. I'm sure I'll get letters for that.
absolutely.